Hello everyone, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I hope everyone getting well by the grace of Almighty Allah. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to our Institution of Global Professional Free International webinar. Once again, I am Kamrul, coordinator of ICT from Bangladesh. Again, thank you all for joining with us in this marvelous session, and I hope you stay with us till the program ends. And time to time, you like our Facebook page and subscribe our YouTube channel for upcoming information. Before we have completed our 836 webinar successfully, today I will be presenting webinar number 837, and the topic is research writing and publication. Today we have a speaker from Philippines. Today our speaker name is Mark Gabriel Wagan. He is an assistant professor for Emilio Eguino College, associate editor for his country, and he is worldwide journal of research register, writer, author, editor, and educational technologist, and publishing specialist of the National Book Development Board from Philippines. Let's we welcome our today's speaker. Let's welcome our today's speaker in the screen. Hello, sir.
Hello, sir. A great day to you.
Thank you, sir. Sir, give a short description about yourself, then you can start your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So, to all listeners today from various parts of the world, a wonderful day or evening to each and every one of you. I would also like to extend my gratitude to the Institute of Global Professionals in Bangladesh for having me here today and for giving me the opportunity to share my knowledge towards a very important topic. So, as mentioned by Mr. Kamrul, I am currently connected at Emilio Aguinaldo College here in the Philippines, and I have a lot of affiliations when it comes to professional, local, and international organizations. My dear audience, I'm glad to say that today we are going to talk about a topic that matters, not just to us educators, but to the world. In fact, to society. This is actually the cause of developments, innovation, best practices, basically everything that we enjoy today. So we will be talking about this topic not just because we need it for our promotions, but because we would also like to contribute to societal development. So I hope in today's session you will learn from me. Welcome everybody to our webinar entitled Research, Writing, and Publication. I'm not going to discuss in detail how to write a research paper and how to publish one because a day wouldn't be enough to talk about that. Instead, what I did is I have selected some of the most important aspects in research writing to share today, as well as the most common questions that people ask me whenever I do a talk like this one. So we are going to answer all of those. And should you have other questions that I would be able to discuss, I believe that we have a separate portion for that later. So just write down your questions, and later I will try my best to give answers to each. Let us start with the definition of research. So, what is research and why do we do it? I believe that research is a rigorous process where people seek answers and explanations to phenomena they know little or nothing about, guided by a proven methodology. So, my dear participants, research is actually very easy to define because every time we encounter unanswered questions, our normal response is to do research. So we could find or we could have the answers. Now, when it comes to why we do it, this is where it gets a little bit complicated. In the academe, most people think that they are doing research just because it is a requirement for their promotion or for regularization and retainment. While most of our students think that it is solely for their graduation or basically just an academic requirement so that they could get their diploma. This may be true, but there is actually more to it. Everything that we see and enjoy today are all results of research. Technology, modernization, industrialization, the best practices in teaching and learning, our laws and policies, actually everything. So, my dear listeners, you are being required and motivated to conduct research not because your bosses, your supervisors, or your managers want you to experience difficulty, but for you to contribute to society, or at least in your field of specialization. Research is very important, my dear listeners. It provides answers to unexplained events, it evaluates theories and assumptions, it leads to solutions to challenges, and it helps in building better communities. Okay? So that is what research is all about. And basically, that is why we do it. Okay, second question. How to select a topic for your study? Apart from data analysis and designing your research instrument, I do believe that this is one of the toughest parts in research writing. Now, there are a lot of factors that you can consider in coming up with a research topic. You may consider your interests, you may focus on research gaps in available studies, you may also focus on the problems that you observe in your industry, in your workplace, for example. So it would really depend on you, okay? But my suggestion is go for a topic that is in your heart, okay? You need to choose a topic that you like and that you love. However, it has to have a potential significance in your field of specialization. Also, another tip from me, let us avoid research areas that are well studied already. Okay? Because going there or focusing on those well studied areas would make your study very common. And the potential results will be very predictable. Okay? It could easily be predicted, as well as studies that have no significance. I would also like you to avoid studies that have no significance. Like, you need to ask yourself before you conduct a study, why would you conduct such a study? What are you trying to accomplish with it? Okay, you ask yourselves those questions. If you cannot provide a justification on why your study is important, forget about it because it's useless. It's definitely useless. Okay? Okay, next question. How can I develop my SOP? SOP is an abbreviation for statements of the problem. And then it is also your research objectives. Okay? So, how do you develop it? Frankly speaking, my dear listeners, it is very wrong to think that the first step in research writing is the conceptualization of a research title. Let's be honest. That is our thinking. We always think that the first step in doing research is thinking our or conceptualizing our research title. However, it is not. It is actually impractical to do that. The first is always to decide on your research area. For example, will you focus on academic performance, customer satisfaction, technological literacy, employees turnover intention, employee satisfaction, etc., etc. Then, after deciding on your research area, the second step is to draft your research objective. That is after you were able to decide on your research area. It's now time for you to develop your research objective. So ask yourself, what do you want to know through this study? What do you want to accomplish with this research? For example, do you want to determine the level of employee satisfaction in the services provided by your institution? Another example is, do you want to determine the level of technological literacy of your students? Do you want to know your students' satisfaction towards online learning modality? What do you want to know? That will be your research objective. Then after that, once you have developed your research objective, that is the only time that you can proceed drafting your research title. Okay, because it's very important for you to make sure that your research area, your research objective, and your research title are consistent with each other. Okay, so that's the more practical way of developing your research objective. Okay, but I have another piece of advice. While you are thinking of your research objective, you must simultaneously think about your research methodology. It is very wrong, my dear listeners, to just think about your research objective without considering what methodology will you be using. Okay? Because if you're going to simultaneously assess your methodology, this way you would be able to know if your research objective is measurable and attainable. Okay? Because deciding on your research objective without determining the research design, the research approach, what is the nature of your variables and how it will be measured, the types of questions, and how will you gather information will not provide you a clear picture of the direction of your paper. So it is very important that while you are writing your research objective, you are already analyzing how you could get the answers to it. Okay? Next. Okay, next question is how to write a review of literature. Sometimes we call it as literature review. So how do we write it? So there are actually two formats that you could follow in writing your literature review. One is thematic, okay? And then the other one is where you separate foreign studies and literature from those that have been published or conducted locally. Okay, for example, I am from the Philippines. So there, one way that I could write my literature is separating those studies that have been published and conducted in other countries. And I would have another separate literature review for those studies that have been conducted and published in the Philippines. Okay? Now, when it comes to selecting between the two format, thematic and the separation between foreign and local studies, both are actually correct. But if I will recommend one, or if I will choose one, I would suggest you to follow the thematic format. Okay? So, meaning to say, you have to develop teams for every literature, for every studies that you could find related to your study. You have to conceptualize teams to separate each literature or studies. So why am I recommending thematic analysis? Because it allows you to analyze what studies and literature cited are trying to suggest on a specific research area. You could actually create a story. And then after that, it will be very easy for you to synthesize the results easily because you're able to determine the similarities, the differences among the cited literatures. Moreover, following the thematic analysis or the thematic format rather, it would prevent you from just searching for studies and literature that has the same title and objective to other studies, and just putting everything on the review of literature without determining its connection to other studies. So it will be very hard for you to find the connection, the similarities, the commonalities, and the differences between one study and another. Okay. Then I have actually an example here. So this is one way to do a literature review, and this follows a thematic format. So if you notice, instead of having foreign literature or foreign studies or local studies as my subtopics, I have a theme. The theme of this literature review is employees dissatisfaction by age. So all of the literature, all of the studies that I will collate, okay, that will be put under this theme will focus on employees dissatisfaction by age. Excuse me. Okay. So if you notice, if you're going to read this word by word, you can realize how I was able to manage to connect each of the studies that I have found related to mine. Because if you're just going to follow the foreign studies, local literature, what are you going to do? You will just get random studies and you will just put everything there without creating a story. Okay, so I want you to take a screenshot of this, especially to those students who are currently doing their research, their thesis. Please take a screenshot of this because this is a practical way, um, or a more effective way to do your review of literature. Okay. Then I just want to share that when doing a literature review, the most common problem is the dearth of studies in your research topic. Okay. So this is actually an issue sometimes, the dearth of studies. But the question is a dearth of studies really possible? Is there really a possibility that there is not much studies and literature out there that have covered the research area that you are trying to study? Is that possible? Because what I have noticed over the years, especially here in the Philippines, there are educators that are forcing students to find studies published in the last 5 years, for example. Okay, especially to research advisors, um, research professors. Okay, if they are asking their students to do a literature review, the common instruction is to find a literature, find studies related to your research in the last 5 years. Beyond 5 years in is unacceptable. So that's what I noticed in my years of experience. Okay, and when students say to them that they couldn't find enough, sir, ma'am, we were only we managed only to find 15 studies, so we are 5 studies short. Let's say, for example, the professor is requiring them at least 20 studies published in the last 5 years. And what is the common response of the professors? The common response is to still force students to find more studies, literatures within that 5 year time frame. You know, listeners, what the professors have failed to realize is maybe, just maybe, there is really a dearth of studies in the research area. Dear educators, to those who are listening, please do not do this, because there is really a possibility of dearth of studies. Um, in fact, though there is a slim chance, but there is still a possibility that a researcher is the first one to conduct a research on a specific topic. So if you are the first one to conduct that study in a specific research area, then how could you find related studies if you are the first one to conduct it? So I hope that everybody's getting the point. So another example is, in the past 2 years, we all know for a fact that researchers have focused on COVID-19 pandemic. Most of the, maybe roughly 90%, 95%, that has been conducted in the past 2 years were focused on COVID-19 pandemic. So if you are going to do a study not about COVID-19, it only means that you are going to have um, limited studies in the past 2 years, because mostly are about COVID-19. So you would definitely encounter a dearth of studies. Okay. Now the question is, sir, what if I have encountered that? What do I need to do? Of course, there is always a way to address this, because a literature review is a component of a research paper, so it is not advisable to not have it. So what you can do is you can consider studies, literatures beyond the initial numbers of years limit. So in case there is really no enough studies in the last 5 years, you can consider studies and literatures in the last 10 years. That would be advisable. Now, in case the dearth of studies is within your field of specialization or within your field of industry, you may consider putting studies that has covered the same topic but in a different research locale or industry. Okay, let's say, for example, your study is employee satisfaction in the hotel industry, but you have encountered a dearth of studies in the hotel industry. So you can consider studies about the customer satisfaction in the manufacturing industry, in the academe, and other industries. So you can do this. You could do this and a lot more. So you could still have a good literature review. All right. Now next question is, how can I determine the number of respondents? Okay, so this is actually a complicated one, and it would really depend on the nature of your study. Okay. Each study requires a specific number of respondents to make the results valid. Okay? Each study. Now, my dear listeners, I want you to listen to this very carefully. It is false that you can decide on your own how many your respondents will be. Please be reminded of this. It is false that you can decide on your own how many your respondents will be. Most especially if your paper is following a quantitative approach, or your study involves an analysis or a representation of a population, or let's say a group of people. Okay, why? Because the number of respondents should be statistically argued or proven. There should always be a basis. You cannot just guess how many. You cannot just say I can I will do, I will have five respondents. You cannot just decide on your own. It must be statistically argued or proven. So it is never right to decide on your own the number of respondents, probably because you are too lazy to ask as many people as possible, or you have a limited time to gather data, or maybe you just don't know how to compute for it. So if that's the case, you must hire a statistician. You really have to get help or request help from a statistician. Always remember, an inadequate number of respondents will sacrifice the validity and reliability of your results. Please keep that in mind. Okay, moving forward. Next question. How to develop your research instrument or tool resulting in good data analysis and interpretation. One of the most important materials that you need to accomplish is your research instrument, simply because this is the tool that you will use to get answers to your statements of the problem, or basically to achieve your research objectives. It could be in the form of questionnaire, it could be an examination, interviews, among others. So first, the questions must be consistent with your statements of the problem or research objective. So that's the first thing that you need to consider. Then, when it comes to your approach of questioning, especially in quantitative research, my dear listeners, please avoid yes or no questions. Okay? I want you to avoid questions that could be answered with a yes or no. I'm not saying that that is incorrect, okay? But I'm just saying that you need to avoid, because it will make your study shallow. Okay? It will make your study shallow. Because the result is so predictable. It's a 50-50 chance, right? So if a person will say yes, or if you were going to ask a person, there are just two possible answers. So it's so predictable. So instead of yes or no, I would suggest you to use a Likert scale. Okay, so instead of a yes or no, you may use a Likert scale, particularly if you are trying to measure a variable such as, but not limited to, let's say, satisfaction, attitude, knowledge level, perceptions, and the likes. Okay? Because compared to a yes or no question, it will allow you to have a better analysis of the data that you would be able to gather. For example, let me give you an example. If you are attempting to determine whether employees in your workplace are satisfied or not, and then you will use a question answerable by yes or no, then you can only end up knowing whether the employees are satisfied or not, right? And then that's it. But you won't be able to tell how satisfied or how dissatisfied they are, right? You won't be able to measure their satisfaction or their level of dissatisfaction, right? Because a yes or no question cannot give you that. It cannot give you those kind of information, which will lead to less precise results. And again, this will make your study shallow. And we want to avoid that. Okay? Because, of course, we want our studies to capture a better understanding of a phenomenon. Okay? Or else it will be nonsense. Right? If your study, just think about this, if your study will provide a very vague result, a very general result, then what's the point of doing the research, right? That's why I'm saying that it will be nonsense if it could not capture a better understanding of a certain phenomenon. It is like you just did that study because you need it for your promotion or you need it for your regularization, and it doesn't matter if it has a contribution in society or to the existing body of knowledge, right? So please take note, my dear listeners, that when you design your research questions, it must consider getting as many specific answers as possible. So it could provide a good data analysis and interpretation. All right? So I hope that everyone is able to follow and understand everything that we are talking about now. Okay, next question is, what are the various types of research designs? Okay. There is actually an endless list of research designs. As a matter of fact, aside from research designs, we also have research approaches and the so-called research designs by outcomes. Okay, so when we say research designs, we differentiate research papers based on how the researchers analyze and interpret the data gathered. Okay, so what is their interpretation or statistical analysis, if there is one? When we talk about research approaches, it is focused on classifying research papers based on the nature of the data being gathered. Is it numerical or not? Is it measurable using numbers or not? While research design by outcomes, from the word itself, differentiate studies based on how results of the study will be utilized. Okay, so those are the three main classification of a research methodology. Okay, So there are many designs, but the most common are descriptive research. We have correlational research. We also have experimental, and we have literature review. Then when it comes to the research approaches, there are three most common. We have quantitative research, we have qualitative research, and then the third one is called the mixed method. So basically, it's a combination of the two, qualitative and quantitative research approaches. So if if uh, if your data is numerical, then your approach would be quantitative. But if it's not, for example, you have conducted interviews to gather information, then your approach would be qualitative. While if it's a combination of the two, you have data that could be measured by numbers, and then you have data that cannot be measured by numbers, then you'll be using the mixed method approach. Okay? Then, in the context of research designed by outcomes, we have three as well. You have pure research, sometimes we call it as basic research. You also have applied research. And lastly, we have action research, which is common to us educators. Okay, moving forward, um, we have another question here. What are the characteristics of an effective researcher, and what research topics would I recommend? Okay. Well, you should be a critical thinker. That's number one. Okay. If you would like to become a good researcher, you must be a critical thinker. And you should also love to read, because you have to read a lot of articles to fully understand your research area. Also, a good researcher does not settle for just any research topic. Okay? So if you're going to do a research, choose one that has a significant role in your field of specialization. So for example, what are the what are examples of topics that has a significant role in your field of specialization? For example, we have increased academic performance of students, coming up with interventions to improve student satisfaction, addressing societal problems such as but not limited to mental health, disaster risk, environmental challenges, population increase, and economic sustainability, among others. So it depends on your field of specialization. But again, it should never be shallow. Always keep that in mind. Your studies should be deep if you really want to be a good researcher. So your research must bring something, my dear listeners. It must contribute something. This is how you could say that you are a good researcher, and not just someone who did it for promotions or other personal gains. Okay, so let us now proceed to research publication. Because if you notice, our discussion for the day is actually divided into two: research writing and research publication. Because I know that this would help all of you, especially educators, in a lot of ways. So, again, let us first define what research publication is. So, basically, research publication is the process of making your study available to the public. Okay? Just imagine this. my dear listeners. Just try to imagine this. You have conducted a study, and after that, you've just put it inside your drawers or cabinets at your houses. Or maybe you just save it in your computer. So, what do you think would be the sense of doing that research if you are the only one who knows about it, right? So, it doesn't make sense. You did the research, and then after that, you kept it within yourself. So, what is the sense of that? So, just imagine if Galileo Galilei did not share the results of his studies on speed and velocity, gravity and free fall, the principle of relativity, inertia, projectile motion, and applied science and technology, describing the properties of pendulums and hydrostatic balances. And let's say he just kept it with himself. So, who wouldn't know these things today, right? If he just kept it with himself, who would know this today? So maybe we do not have science teachers today because we do not have knowledge on sorts of scientific explanations, right? Imagine if Uno Cygnus, the father of technology education, did not share his studies with the world. Maybe we would know nothing about the influence of technology on our education system today. Because, again, he kept it with himself. So basically, my dear listeners, we engage ourselves in research publication so our study results won't be wasted. So we could spread to everyone what we have determined, what we have found out through our research. Because this could be the answers to the challenges that we face today. So do not get mad or angry at your institution or the governing bodies for this research requirement that they are imposing because they are actually giving you an opportunity to establish a value in you, to make change, to give something valuable in your field that could help in establishing a better future. Okay? So I hope that as you listen to me, you're able to realize that doing research is really something deep. It's really something valuable, not just to us, but also in the world where we live today. Okay, so next is what benefits does publishing bring to the author? Okay, well, there are a lot of benefits that research publication could provide. Well, number one is professional development. So this includes promotion, salary increase, higher employability rate because it adds to your qualifications. And sometimes this could also help in regularization. Number two is increase expertise level in your field of specialization. Okay. Third, better work performance, especially if you are an educator. Through research, you would be able to determine the best teaching and learning practices. Should your study focus on that, right? Number four, increase credibility, not just within your organization, but also among peers in other institutions. And then lastly, and but definitely not the least, because I think that this fifth benefit is the most rewarding. Professional networking opportunities, because you are able to connect with fellow researchers, educators, and you would also be given opportunities to be a part of professional organizations because your name is being known. in various parts of the world. All right. So now let us talk about some frequently asked questions in the actual publication process. Okay. So first question is where to publish, or how can you select a journal to publish your research? So, my dear listeners, this is very, very important because your choice of platform where you will publish your research could build or break you as an author. Your decision on this could put your research on a good standing or could put it onto waste. So, in choosing a journal, I would suggest you to check 6 factors. So, please check these 6 factors. Number one, legitimacy. Number two, charges and fees. Number three is duration of submission to publication processes. Four is publication setup. Fifth, scope of the journal. And lastly, journal's reach. So you should not just submit to anywhere. You must first evaluate all of these things just to make sure about the credibility of the journal that you are looking at. Okay, so all are equally important. So let us discuss one by one. First is legitimacy. Do you know that there are a lot of predatory journals out there? Are you aware of that? At first, it looks legitimate, it looks real, but it is actually not. Predatory journals, from the word itself, are just making themselves look legitimate. And then when they have gained your trust, they will be working to make a profit out of you without really publishing your research. Normally, they just upload your research article on their website, and then that's it. So you thought that it is published, but it's just uploaded on their website. Now, how would you know if a journal is predatory or not? So the following are the things that you must assess to determine whether a journal is predatory or not. Red flag number one. If it doesn't have a publisher, it is likely to be predatory. Red flag two. If it offers fast publication process, it is likely to be predatory. You will be surprised, my dear listeners. These predatory journals are offering a few days to publish your paper. In fact, I have seen many saying that they could publish it between 4 to 7 days. I mean, 4 to 7 days? This is very impossible if you will really follow the standard review and editing processes, right? So later I will be discussing the normal duration of publication so all of you would understand. Now the third red flag is if it offers minimal publication fee, Despite the fast submission to publication process, it is likely to be predatory as well. Red flag 4, if it doesn't have a registered ISSN. ISSN means International Standard Serial Number. That is important to prove that the journal is registered in the National Library of the country where it is founded. So if that's the case, it is likely to be predatory. The fifth red flag is if it is claiming to be indexed on a journal's or research article indexing platform or database, but it doesn't show in the database's website, then it is likely to be predatory. And then lastly, if it is listed on Bill's list of predatory journals, it is likely to be predatory. So, if you are not familiar with Bill's list, you can actually type it in the World Wide Web. You could search it in Google.com. Just type Bill's list predatory journals, and it will appear. Okay. So normally, checking these red flags would be enough to tell whether a journal is predatory or not. But in extreme cases, let's say for example, the predatory journal is so good, they were able to hide all of this. So you can actually test them you can actually test them yourself. You can write a dummy research paper with plagiarized content, just copy paste whatever you could find in the World Wide Web, and you can think or put a title that makes sense or that doesn't make sense, okay, and then put a name of a person who doesn't exist or a cartoon character, for example, and then you submit it to the journal. So if it passes the screening and review process, it only means that they are not really evaluating articles. They are just operating for money, therefore predatory. So my dear listeners, you have to be very careful on this because I know a lot of educators who were victimized of these predatory journals. So you please be careful because you are just wasting your money. You're just you think that you are paying for something, but you are not really, because it will never your paper will never be published. So please be careful. All right, next. Next consideration is the charges or fees. So the charges or fees of a journal could be called as an article processing charge or a publication fee. It doesn't matter because basically it's the same. So this is very important because there are journals that charge authors a very high rate simply because of the credibility of the journal. Most especially if it will be published under an open access condition. So here, students, listeners, my dear listeners. So sorry because I'm a professor. I normally, address my listeners or students. So anyway, my dear listeners. So here I have grouped journals into four. So these are all legitimate. It's just a matter of um, differentiating them based on their publication setup policy, whether it's open access, meaning to say readers can read and download the published articles for free. And we also have subscription based policy journals, meaning to say um, readers before they're allowed to read and download articles, they must pay a subscription fee. So these are the differences. So um, it's important for you to consider this because, of course, we are different in terms of financial capacity, and also each group provides a different publication setup. Okay. Anyway, you can take a screenshot of this for your future references. Go ahead, so that you could easily assess the journals that you are considering for your research publication. Okay, I'll now go to the next slide. All right, so next is the duration of submission to publication processes. So this is also a very important thing that you must consider, because publishing your research takes time. As I mentioned earlier, it cannot be done in 1 week. It cannot be done in 2 weeks. It takes time, especially if you are trying to publish your paper in a good and reputable journal. Okay? Why does it takes time? Because it will undergo a rigorous process. From submission, it will be initially screened, guided by the scope of the journal and then the author's submission guidelines. Then after the submission, it will undergo review process. The fastest would be roughly a month, and in some cases, it would take 3 to 5 months. Then after that, it will be sent back to you for revisions, as well as to inform you about the decision whether your paper is accepted or not. So there are four types of decisions. Your paper could be accepted with no revisions needed. It could be accepted with minor revisions. It could be accepted with major revisions, or it could be rejected. Okay, so if it's rejected, then you really have to consider submitting to other journals, because there's no way that they will be reconsidering your manuscript. So in the time of revision, normally you will be given a few weeks to a month to make the necessary changes, and then you have to send it back to them for editing. Okay. Now, once it has been edited based on the format of the journal, your paper will be sent back again to you for proofreading. So in the proofreading stage, you will check if all of the content of the paper is accurate, there's no typographical error, the data is still correct. So that is what happens in the proofreading stage. And then once everything is okay, the paper will now be subject for publication. So depending on the number of submissions and the pending papers, but because of course it's not just you who submitted a research for publication consideration, there are a lot of researchers as well. So depending on how many are the pending papers, your article will be released. It might take a few months, but it could also take more than a year before it gets officially published. Like in my experience, my last my last paper got published after 1 year and 6 months. Because that is really the norm. Okay, it cannot be quick. Okay, but you don't have to be worried. Um, when once your paper has been accepted, of course the publisher will be informing you about the date of your article publication, and they'll be telling you what volume number or issue number of the journal will your article be included. So you are aware on how long you have to wait to see your paper officially published. Okay. Okay, and then lastly, last consideration in choosing the journal is the scope of the journal. There are multidisciplinary. There are journals that allows or accepts articles in various fields. These are called multidisciplinary journals. But there are some journals that are focused on just one field. So you must make sure that you are submitting to a journal that accepts articles in your research area. Okay? You must read the scope of the journal so that you are sure that you are submitting to a journal suitable for your research study. So this is very simple, but it's very important as well. Okay, now what journal do I recommend, or what kind of journals would I recommend? Remember the groupings of journals that I presented a while ago. Okay, remember we have group 1, group 2, group 3, and group 4. So among the four, I would suggest you to go for group 4. Why? It's free, no charges at all, as in completely zero charges from submission to review to editing to the actual publication. The publisher won't require you to pay any amount of money. These are commonly university managed and funded. Okay, like for example, if your school, okay, let me give you one example of a journal like um, Northern Negros State College of Science and Technology here in the Philippines. They have a journal called as International Research Journal of Science, Technology, Education, and Management. They offer free publication process, okay, because it is funded by the university. And there are a lot. You just need to search for them. There are a lot, not just in the Philippines, but also in other countries. And don't worry with the citation score. Normally, this journals also has good citation index. So for you to see the citation scores of the journal, you may look into their indexing partners and check its number of citation. Okay. However, there are some new journals that do not have citation scores because they're just new, like what I've said. But knowing that it is funded and managed by an educational institution and it's free, this will ensure you or assure you that it isn't predatory, because no predatory journal will be giving free services. It's just common sense. Okay, and then lastly, this will be our last topic for the day, is presenting your work in conferences or colloquium considered as publication. I actually get this a lot. I get this a lot whenever I talk uh, to researchers, whenever I talk to educators, whenever I do talks like this, I get this kind of questions a lot. Some even think that presenting their research in conferences has the same weight as to publishing it. However, that is not the case. So the answer to this question is no. Presenting in conferences and publishing your paper are two different animals. Okay? Why? Publishing your paper allows the publisher to gain a shared right to your research. This means that you and the publisher share responsibility in managing the dissemination and the protection of the research, as well as to benefit from the achievements it could reach, such as number of reads, citations, and other recognitions. Okay, so that is in the context of publication. While if you just presented your paper in a conference or let's say colloquium, the management or the organizers do not get any of those. So basically a conference is just a platform provided to you to share your findings. Okay? So it's like this one. Like IGP. It's giving educators, it's like giving people an opportunity to share their research findings. However, I'm not discouraging you to present your paper in conferences. But should you do it in case you really want to do it, or maybe it's one of the requirements of your university or college, I would suggest you to choose a conference that intends to publish presented papers that have met their publication criteria. Because aside from sharing your findings in the conference, this would give you a chance to have your research published after the event. Okay, so how could you find conferences like this? Normally, conferences that do this are those organized by organizations and educational institutions that manage a journal of their own. So it is smarter to present in those conferences than others. Okay, so that will be all, my dear listeners. Again, thank you very much, Institute of Global Professionals, for this opportunity. And thank you to everybody for attending this momentous event. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, sir, for your clear explanation about research. I hope our participants learn a lot from you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now we are going to our quiz competition, and after that, we come back with our question and answer session. Okay, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Dear participants, now we are going to our quiz competition. Today, our quiz code is IGP. The code is IGP. Let's begin our quiz video. Dear participants, this is our quiz session time. You can join this session by slide.com, and after that you have to put the code, and the code is IG. Then you can join this session. Today, top 10 quiz competition winners get their quiz certificate. So, I request everyone to join with your full name, which will likely print on your quiz certificate. And don't forget to mention your friends in the comment box to join this quiz session. Now 34 participants already joined with us. We start our quiz competition after 1 minute later. So join the hurry up. To join this session, you have to go to slido.com and after that you have to put the code and the code is IG. You can also scan our QR code from the screen to join this live quiz session. Now 43 participants already joined. We start our quiz competition now. Our first question is, what is research? Is it investigating information or writing a paper for fun? Option number one, investigating information is the right answer. Our next question is, if you are writing a research paper, you only need one source for all your information. The statement is true or false. The statement is false and option number two is the right answer. Our next question is, the thesis statement in a research paper should be stated somewhere in the intro paragraph or should guide the writing of the entire paper. Option number two should guide the writing of the entire paper is the right answer. Our next question is, in academic writing, we try and avoid colloquial language or messy words. Option number one, colloquial language is the right answer. Our next question is, which is not the four parts of the writing process? Is it summarize, edit, write, and rewrite, or Edit, write, rewrite, and plan. Option number two, edit, write, rewrite, and plan is the right answer. Next question is description of the research paper section and introduction to the research topic. Is it discussion or introduction? Option number two, introduction is the right answer. Our next question is which of the following factors influence the research timeline? Is it grant funding or publication of a manuscript? Option number two, publication of a manuscript is the right answer. Next question is writing in text situation from a journal article requires surname, volume number, or surname, year of publication. Option number two, surname, year of publication is the right answer. Next question is a research assistant collects information that a writer uses to support an argument in an article they are writing. The statement is true or false. The statement is true and option number one is the right answer. Our last and final question is research list graphic organizers drawing. Is it publish or free write? Option number two, free write is the right answer. Thank you everyone. Now we are going to see our leaderboard. Thank you everyone and congratulations of our top 10 quiz competition winners. Top 10 quiz competition winners get their quiz certificate after the session from our official Facebook page. Our Facebook page address is Institute of Global Professionals. Now we are going to our Q&A session. After a short video clip, we come back again. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, sir. Our first question is, good afternoon, sir. The question is, what are the advantages of publishing a research paper?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sir Flomi Salviejo, for that question. Well, I did mention earlier the benefits of repeat that again, but it could help you with your professional development. That's number one. Number two is you will gain more information about your field of specialization. And the most rewarding part of publishing your paper, in my own opinion, would be being able to connect to other researchers around the world because you are allowing your paper to be read by as many as people possible. So apart from personal gains, you would be able to contribute something valuable in your field of specialization. If you publish your paper, like for example, you found out that a new teaching approach is effective nowadays. So you might be surprised that maybe your findings of a new teaching approach is already being used abroad because it has been proven by you as a researcher. So those are some of the advantages or the benefits that you could get in publishing your research paper.
Thank you, sir. Our next question is, hi, sir. Is it fine to use open-ended question? If yes, how to tabulate those gathered information?
Oh, this is a very good question. Thank you, Mr. Jonito Baile Compari. So yes, definitely yes. It's fine to use open-ended questions as long as your research approach will be qualitative. Okay, because it cannot be done if you are following a quantitative research approach because that will require numerical data. So in this case, if you will be asking open-ended questions, you can use thematic analysis. So thematic analysis will allow you to find the most important points in the responses of your respondents. So it could be tabulated based on themes, or sometimes we call it as codes.
Thank you, sir. Our next question is, how many research designs do we have?
Okay, thank you very much also for that question, Kiangwi Isaiah. So as I mentioned earlier, there is actually an endless list, but there are four most common. First, you have descriptive research design, you have experimental, you have literature review, and the correlational research. So those are the most common research designs that we follow nowadays.
Thank you, sir. Our next question is, can action research have null and alternate hypothesis?
Oh, there's a lot of questions, Mr. Kamrul. All right, yeah, okay. Can action research have null and alternate hypothesis? Well, yes, sir. That would your hypothesis will be just predictions, but of course, it would depend on the result of your statistical treatment. So, we in writing our hypothesis, we can just predict based on what available literatures and studies suggest. But of course, it will still depend on the result of our statistical treatment.
Thank you, sir. Today's topic is very interesting. For the number of question is also increasing.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And the next question is, what is colloquial language? Oh yeah,
Okay,
that
thank
is the
you very
question.
much again, Kiangwi. Well, when you say colloquial language, meaning to say this is language that everybody understand, not uncommon words. Okay, because if you will use uncommon words in writing your research, then it will be very difficult for others to understand the message it conveys, especially in creating your research instrument. You must make sure that the words or the language that you use in designing your research questions is understandable by everybody or your respondents. So I would suggest that you use colloquial language rather than um, uncommon words in your research.
Thank you, sir. Our next question is, what research design or method can be used if the study is about developing something and evaluate at the same time? And thank you very much.
Okay, let me read that again. This is kind of long. If the study is about developing something and evaluate at the same time, well, Ma'am Carmela, when we think of our research design, it would really depend on the nature of our variables. I cannot give you a specific method without knowing what specifically are the variables to be measured. Because you can actually develop something in all of the research designs, whether that's descriptive, correlational. You can develop something, you can find out results. At the same time, you can do some evaluation. So it depends on the variable. It's not. Um, I need to see first what kind of variable that we are trying to measure, because every design helps us to develop something and evaluate some actions.
Thank you, sir. I think this is our last question, and the question is, some graduating students do research even if they are not motivated to do so. Is it still effective even if they do it just to comply?
Okay, thank you, April, for that wonderful question. That is the reason why we have this session today, so that you would understand that research is not just about complying to the requirement of your school. It's not just about doing it because it's for your graduation. So doing research is something that you are doing because you want to give a valuable contribution in your field of specialization. So in that context, April, you must be already motivated. So please do not just think of any topic. Okay, please carefully analyze those topics that you think can do something to help us improve the things we do. Let's say, for example, you are in the academic environment or in other field of specialization. It must be something that creates um, a contribution, not just for the sake of a requirement.
Thank you so much, sir, for your wonderful answer. I think this session is too much effective for our participants and they learn a lot from you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much, Sir Kamrul.
Sir,
Thank you as well. Yeah.
what is your last and final words for our participants?
Well, my dear listeners, again, thank you for listening to me. I hope that you have learned a lot, and I hope that I was able to inspire you as well in research writing and publication, because we all know for a fact that in the academic environment, um, we normally find research as very difficult. Sometimes we don't want to go there, right? So I hope that this session was able to make you realize that it is actually doing something good. And also, I would like to extend again my gratitude to IGP for having me here. Dear listeners, to those who are not yet followers, to those who are not yet members, please follow IGP. It gives us a lot of information. It allows us to share what we know to make this world better. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you again soon.
Obviously, sir, I hope we'll meet together in our another session in
Yes.
IGP platform. Thank you. Dear participants, today our program name is Research Writing and Publication, and today's our certification code is IGP 4985. The code is IGP 4985. Please note that code or take a screenshot of this picture. Without code, no one is eligible for certificate. With code, you can claim your certificate anytime from our website. Our website address is eduigp.com. Thank you everyone for your active participation in this quiz session. I hope we'll meet together in our evening session. Thank you everyone. Stay happy and stay safe.